Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Thought we would catch up on some mailbag questions today. So this will be a mailbag edition of the podcast. Please, if you do have mailbag questions, you can email those to bigblueview@gmail.com. Always appreciate your participation, your input, your questions. Always try to get to as many as I can. With all the things going on around the Giants, new interim head coach, everything swirling around the Giants as they continue to lose games, questions about Joe Schoen, questions about Shane Bowen, questions about the new head coach, questions about what things will look like for the rest of the season. The mailbag is overflowing with questions, and there's just no way I could get to everything I wanted to get to in just the weekly Saturday mailbag. So we'll catch up on some of that here today. And what I thought I would do is start with some older questions, some questions that have been sitting in the mailbag that are valid, legitimate questions that I've wanted to get to. Uh, over the last couple of weeks and haven't really had an opportunity. So we'll try to get to as much of that here as we can today in the next few minutes. So let's get started here, Giants fans. All right, Frank Coleman asks a question about rookies Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart. There's still been some speculation or been some chatter that it's possible that Dart and Carter, despite the Giants being 2-9, despite the way things look right now, even still despite Carter having only a half a sack at this point, been some speculation or some chatter that they might both win the rookie of the year. Carter on the defensive side and Dart, of course, on the offensive side. And and Frank wants to know first. He wants to know, who votes. How are these awards voted on? Who makes the choice? And he also wants to know if two players from the same team have ever won the awards in the same season. And Frank, it works like this: the Associated Press awards at the end of the year are voted on by a national panel of what is now 49 media members who cover the league on a regular basis. Some of those are names that you might know, even including, Tom Brady, Rich Gannon, Mina Kimes, people like that. But they're national media members who have been around the game for a long time. And obviously these things are voted on, and there's a point system, you know, based on, you know, based on first place vote, second place vote, third place vote, etc. The other part of your question, in 2023, quarterback CJ Stroud and edge defender of the Houston Texans each won their respective Rookie of the Year awards. That's the only time since 1967 when the awards were split. There used to be just one Rookie of the Year award when they were split into offense and defense. That's the only time I can find that one team has had both winners. All right, let's get to a second question. David Silver says at the beginning of the Joe Shane era, we heard John Mara marvel at the building of a computer architecture and data driven approach to the scouting side that the Giants previously didn't have. He says, does this effort at bringing the Giants into the modern era help Joe Shane, the Giants' current GM, keep his job, or is it easily transferred to a new GM? Also, David says the New England Patriots blew it on a coach, blew it on a quarterback, but built their way back to relevance quickly. Are the Patriots a better organization than the Giants? So, David, first of all, I do think that what Joe Shane accomplished in rebuilding the front office for the Giants and building out all of the technology that they currently have, in revamping the scouting staff, in revamping the front office, in revamping all of the Giants policies, processes, how they do business, from the front office and scouting perspective. I do think that that helps him. Look, when you fire a general manager, you basically are knocking a building down. You're basically, knocking it all the way down. You're basically tearing up the foundation. You're basically digging everything up and starting over. This is the biggest thing as to why Joe Shane may still have a job, or still has a job, and may still have one in the 2026 season. I don't think the Giants look at their situation and think that it has to be torn all the way down to the studs, all the way down to the foundation. I think they feel like progress has been made and is being made, and they don't want to go through that complete full tear down all the way down to replacing a bunch of the scouts again that they just did 4 years ago, to replacing a bunch of the front office members, to completely changing how they do business, how they do everything. I just don't think the Giants want to do that. So I do think that that could help Joe Shane. Is that stuff transferable to a new general manager? Sure it is. Will that new general manager have his own twist, his own things that he wants to add or change about however that's done? Absolutely. So what Joe did was bring the Giants into alignment with what the rest of the league does. So that's where the Giants are now, and he does get credit for that. As for the Patriots part of that, look, the Patriots have quickly turned around from a year ago. But you say they missed on a quarterback. They missed on Mac Jones in 2021, which was the Belichick regime. Okay. So you really can't equate that to anything that their current regime has done. Now, they were able to draft Drake May a year ago, and that honestly is simply good fortune. The Giants wanted Drake May as well. The way the draft worked out, the Patriots had the number 3 overall pick. The Giants had the number 6 overall pick. The Patriots were smart enough not to trade that pick to the Giants, and they took Drake May. They were in position to get the quarterback, and they did it. In terms of the coach, they had Gerard Mayo a year ago. They realized that was a mistake. They were very fortunate to land Mike Vrabel as their head coach. That wasn't expertise. That wasn't organizational wizardry. That was obvious common sense. Vrabel was available. He's a longtime Patriot as a player. Uh, if that job was available, that was always the one Mike Vrabel was going to take. So I don't think the Patriots did anything here where you can say, oh, they're such a better organization. They were in the right position at the right time, and they took advantage of it. Maybe we'll look back in a year or two and say, hey, the Giants over those 2 years, they got Malik Neighbors, and they got Jackson Dart, and they got Abdul Carter. And look at where they are now. Maybe that's going to take a little bit longer, but maybe a year from now we look at that and say, hey, that was a pretty good rebuild with 3 guys who could be stars in the league for a long time if they all reach the levels that people expect them to reach. All right, let's move to another question. Joseph Evans wants to know, what is the latest on linebacker Micah McFadden's injury, and is he coming back this season? Joseph, the Micah McFadden went on IR after week 1 with his foot injury. We have not seen Micah McFadden in the locker room. Um, no one has asked about McFadden. There have been no updates from the Giants about McFadden. You wouldn't expect there to be. He was expected to miss most, if not all, of the season. And at this point, it's become clear that Micah McFadden is a limited player in some ways, but it's become clear that the Giants, with such a horrific run defense, it's become clear that the Giants miss the things that Micah McFadden does well. Micah McFadden fits the run very well. Micah McFadden is very often in position to make plays. His a little bit limited athleticism sometimes doesn't allow him to make all of those plays, but he fits his gaps properly. He's in position to make plays. He can get into the backfield. So there's no doubt that the Giants do miss him. In terms of whether he'd be back this year, again, we haven't seen him. We haven't talked to him. We don't know. But look, there's 6 weeks left in the season. Is there a point really for McFadden to play? He could, he's a free agent to be at the end of the year. Maybe he'd want to get in a couple games just to show people he's healthy. But the Giants are 2-9. They might finish the season 2-15. I just don't know that there's a real good reason for Micah McFadden to hurry back to play a couple of games at the end of the season at a point in time when most of his teammates have pretty much packed it in. So I doubt that we're going to see Micah the rest of the year. We might, but I have my doubts. Excuse me. David Goffin has a question about the Pittsburgh Steelers. David wants to know, when you look at the Steelers and you look at the Giants, obviously two of the foundational NFL franchises. He wants to know how it is that the Steelers have had so much stability. Three head coaches in the last 50 some years: Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin, and they continue on a year after year basis to field, competitive football teams. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season in all the years he's coached the Steelers. And David says, are the Rooneys just better football people than the Maras? And look, if you want to say that, then maybe the Rooneys are better football people than anybody else that owns a team in the NFL, because no one has been able to match the stability that the Steelers have had in their organization. No one has been able to do that. It's not just the Giants. At least the Giants, when you look at the Giants' history, yes, it's been up and down. Yes, they had the wilderness years in the late 60s and through the 70s. Basically, you could probably say they're in another stretch of wilderness years now. But when they get it right, they get it right and they've won championships. There's a lot of teams out there that haven't been able to do that. Um, I don't know the secret sauce of the Steeler organization of the Rooneys. Um, Maybe it's partially that it's single family ownership. When you look at the Giants, it's a split ownership between the Mara and Tisch families. That comes with its own set of problems because it's not necessarily one vision. It's two two rich families, two powerful families, two, rich people at the top of that organizational chart who have to come to an agreement, and that can get messy. So that to me is always part of the equation with the Giants. I think everybody is jealous of the stability that the Steelers have put together, but I don't think that you should take a shot at the Giants organization because they haven't been able to match that, simply because no one else has been able to match it. All right, the last question that I'm going to take today comes from Florian Cortez, and Florian wants to know something about the next head coaching search. He pretty much wants me to put my GM cap on. He says getting the next head coach is obviously critical, and Joe Shane can't swing and miss on this. How do I look at the process and vetting of a potential candidate? If I could put my GM hat on, what would I be looking for? And what would I be asking of a potential head coach candidate? Florian, I've said this in other places. It does not matter to me if the next head coach is a guy that comes from the offensive side of the football or a guy who comes from the defensive side of the football. I could care less. What I want, what I need, what I think the Giants should be seeking in their next head coach is a guy that they believe can be a leader of men. A guy, look, an NFL locker room is filled with dozens and dozens of alpha males, guys who guys who make good money, guys who have always been the best player at whatever other level they played in, Pop Warner, high school, college. They've always been the star. These are guys who have their own ideas, they have their own agendas, they have their own brands, they have their own lives, they have things going on outside the building. You need somebody who can set standards, who can enforce accountability, who can speak to guys on offense, defense, and special teams, who can get everyone in the building all the way down to the equipment guys and the guys that mow the lawns, on the practice fields, and the people that work in the kitchens. You want everybody on the same page. You want everybody working for the same goal, and you need somebody who can do that and who can get these guys to buy into whatever message is being sold. And when they stray from the message, when they don't do things properly, can and will hold them accountable. That to me is what you need. You don't necessarily need the brightest offensive mind or the best defensive play caller. You need a guy who can lead a football team. I would prefer, if there's a guy out there, I would prefer a guy with experience. I would prefer a guy that not only with experience, because the Giants did that with Pat Shermer, but Pat Shermer did not have a winning pedigree as a head coach prior to coming to the Giants and proved as a Giants head coach that he was a good coordinator, not a head coach. I would like a guy not only with experience, but with a winning pedigree, a guy that's been there, done that, not necessarily won Super Bowls, but shown that he can win, shown that he can run a program, shown that he can lead a locker room filled with alpha male professional athletes. That's what I would like in my ideal candidate. Unfortunately, Florian, most of those guys already have jobs. So you're looking at Kevin Stefanski and wondering if the Cleveland Browns would let him go. You're looking at John Harbaugh and wondering if Harbaugh's relationship with the Baltimore Ravens has run its course. You're looking at Mike Tomlin and wondering somehow if this might be Tomlin's last ride in Pittsburgh and he'd be interested in coming to New York and and trying to build a winner in a different organization. Uh, Mike McCarthy's on that list, and then of course, some of these guys that have never been head coaches before, might be the right guy too. I don't know. I would prefer someone that's done it. I hope the Giants take a good long look at Mike Kafka as well, if he does a good job here for the next few weeks. So far for me, Kafka has done well. He's off to a good start, but that's what I would be looking for. If it turns out to be a defensive guy, you obviously have to ask about the plan on the offensive side. Who's he bringing in as coordinator? What's important to him in a quarterback? Is he on board with going forward with Jackson Dart? Because if you're not on board with going forward with Jackson Dart, you can't be the Giants' next head coach. That's what they're committed to. There's no reason to deviate from that. So you have to be committed. You have to believe in Jackson Dart if you're taking this job. If you're an offensive guy interviewing for this job, you have to lay out a plan for how you're going to fix this defense. Who are you going to bring in as your defensive coordinator? How are you going to fix the run game? How are you going to hold some of these guys who consistently blow assignments, who show you inconsistent effort? How are you going to fix all of that? So for me, it's about leadership. And if you're in whatever side of the ball is not your specialty, you better have a solid, workable plan because in the end, this is all about Jackson Dart. Whether you hire an offensive guy, defensive guy, first time head coach, third time head coach, whether you bring Tom Coughlin out of retirement, which I'm kidding about that, but no matter what you do, this is about Jackson Dart. The hardest thing for an NFL franchise to do is to find a quarterback they think can take them where they want to go. A quarterback who they think they'll be happy with for the next 8 to 10 years. The Giants have found that guy in Jackson Dart. Now it's incumbent upon the Giants to put the right coaching staff and the right roster around him and make it work. It's incumbent upon the Giants not to do what they did to Daniel Jones and mess the whole thing up. So we'll see what happens there, but that's what I would do. That's what I would be after. I want leadership. I want a guy who will hold his team accountable. I want a Dan Campbell type. That's what I want. I want a Dan Campbell type. I want a Jim Harbaugh type. One of those guys who is the unquestioned leader, who sets the culture, who everybody understands he's the boss. It's his word. It's his way. This is how we do it. And there's no questions. And there's no wondering if they have if the Giants have enough leadership. That's what I want from the next head coach. We'll see if the Giants can find that. I certainly hope that they can. Anyway, Giants fans, I think that that's probably a good spot for me to call it a day. Get a few of your mailbag questions answered that I haven't had a chance to get to. Please, as I said earlier, if you have mailbag questions, drop those to bigblueview@gmail.com and I'll get to as many of those as I can in the weeks to come. All right. Thank you, as always, for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.